Thanks. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Professor Steve Burks from the University of Minnesota Morris. He's a professor of economics and management on the campus, which is about 3 hours drive from here. So if you're looking for a pleasant place to visit, I suggest Morris, Minnesota. Professor Burke's work focuses on two main research areas: experimental and behavioral personnel economics and the economics of the U.S. trucking industry. He's affiliated with the Institute of the Study of Labor in Bonn, Germany, and the Center for Decision Research and Experimental Economics at the University of Nottingham in the United Kingdom. He received his PhD in economics from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 1999 and has been at the UMM campus since then. He's been chair of the Standing Technical Committee on Trucking Industry Research for the Transportation Research Board since 2014, and he's just finally stepped down and is now the past chairman of this very exalted committee. Anyway, without further ado, Professor Burks.
Thank you very much, Max, for that kind introduction. So the work I'm going to present today is done by our research project at the University of Minnesota Morris, the Truckers and Turnover Project, we call it. We are a participating research group of the Roadway Safety Institute, and the work that I'll be reporting on was done in collaboration with Harvard Medical School, Virginia Tech Transportation Research Institute, a medical services company called Precision Pulmonary Diagnostics, and Schneider Enterprise Resources LLC, or Schneider for short, which is the motor carrier involved. So the title of the talk, Non-Adherence with Employer-Mandated Sleep Apnea Treatment and Increased Risk of Serious Truck Crashes. Now, that's source of this talk is a paper of the same name. It was published in the medical journal Sleep in the May 2016 issue. And it has multiple co-authors. I note the co-authors from the institutions I mentioned, and I'm also proud to note the people with the little years behind their names. Those are former and current students at the time of publication of the University of Minnesota Morris, who were researchers that worked on this project with me and my main collaborator at UMM, a biostatistician named John Anderson. So I thought I'd start by explaining very briefly, if this is a talk about trucking safety, why I study trucking safety. And the answer is because I'm from an academic family, and I actually started studying for the PhD in philosophy many years ago, and I dropped out to go drive tractor trailers. So here you see pictures of me in 1977 with a truckload carrier hauling steel, and in 1983 with a less than truckload carrier doing road work between terminals. Oh, a second here, I forgot to activate. Now, are we better? Okay. I'm sorry. Was anything I said before able to be heard on the web? Okay, so it just wasn't the best fidelity, but you could hear it. All right, good. So I don't have to repeat anything. All right. So my punchline from this little personal story is that I have a concern for trucking safety because I have been there and I have done that. This is what we call skiing on 18 wheels. It's the longest downgrade on the interstate system that is east of the Rocky Mountains. I've never done the Grapevine, thank heavens. All honor to the drivers who drive the Grapevine. This was bad enough for me. Here's one who didn't make it. So I care about this issue because I have some skin in the game. Now, what I'm going to talk about today is a large-scale, employer-mandated program to screen, diagnose, and treat obstructive sleep apnea. Now, what is obstructive sleep apnea? It is a disease in which the airway of the person suffering from the disease spontaneously closes during sleep, and the brain partly wakes up to start breathing. That causes increases in blood pressure, it spikes adrenaline, it causes all kinds of knock-on effects, and the patient never gets fully restful sleep, which as sleep science has advanced in the last 25 years, we've come to understand more and more, is almost like a death sentence. Being deprived of restful sleep over extended periods of time is like being deprived of water over extended periods of time. It's that important to the body and to the health. Well, of course, there's some effects of this disease, daytime sleepiness, among other bad side effects. The way we typically measure or categorize the intensity of obstructive sleep apnea is by the apnea-hypopnea index. That's the number of times basically that a partial or full closing is occurring per hour. So when it's between 5 and 15, it's called mild sleep apnea. Between 15 and 30, moderate, and above 30 is considered severe. Now these also, of course, go along with other clinical indications, but this is the rule of thumb that clinicians would use. There is effective treatment for this disease, continuous or automatic positive airway pressure machines, which the person having this disease can wear at night with a mask that fits over their face, and it pressurizes the airway and prevents the closures. There also are, for some sufferers, the ability to use a dental device, and for some others, some surgical interventions sometimes work. But the primary and the gold standard treatment is generally CPAP or APAP. And I should mention that body mass index is very strongly correlated with obstructive sleep apnea. Some people just have it from genetic predisposition about how the structure of their airway is constructed. But if you are overweight, above a certain level, the chance of having this disease goes over 80%. Now, the company that we are collaborating with here is Schneider Enterprises. It's a large-scale national truckload motor carrier. It's generally in the top 10 motor carriers, for-hire motor carriers in the United States by total revenues in any given year, usually in the top 5 or 6. And the management of this company decided, based upon evidence they observed with their drivers, that they should institute a program to diagnose, to screen, diagnose, and to treat this disease amongst their drivers. They are the only firm. They were the first firm to ever do this, and as far as I know today, they are still the only firm that does this and requires driver participation. A number of other larger firms have such programs, but they are voluntary for drivers, as I understand it. The process is that a certain particular on-the-computer screening questionnaire is used. It's called SomniSage. It comes from the company that provided the sleep apnea medical services for Schneider, Precision Pulmonary Diagnostics. Drivers have to take this periodically upon intake and periodically during their work at the firm. Someone who is screened as being at high risk of having obstructive sleep apnea is then on a schedule determined by the company, by Schneider, sent to have a test. Now, during the time period we're looking at, which is the startup phase of the Schneider program, the only test that they used was the overnight polysomnogram, or PSG, which is considered in sleep medicine to be the gold standard for diagnosing this disease. If you go on the web and look at Harvard Medical School's little video for Shack Attacks Sleep Apnea, you can see what this is about with a couple of our co-authors in this paper on the video. Now, if diagnosed positive in this program, then Schneider first provided to their employees who were so diagnosed an APAP machine and required their adherence to a minimum treatment standards as a condition of employment. Now, the diagnosis and treatment were treated as preventive medicine under Schneider's employee medical plan. So for those employees on the medical plan, there's no out-of-pocket cost. So let's look at some of the statistics for this program. The period for our analysis we set based on the data we had available and how the program had begun as January 2005 to December 2009. And the history of the program is that some pilot work was done in 2005, and the major implementation began in April of 2006. During this time period, not everybody got screened. It was still a startup phase, but 17,000 were screened, and about 2,200 drivers were diagnosed during this period. That's about 2/3 of those who screened as likely to have the disease. Of course, some drivers exit. We'll talk about exit. That comes a little bit later after they're screened as highly likely to have sleep apnea, and some are not observed after the end of the study period. We have approximately 1,800 people diagnosed positive and approximately 400 diagnosed negative in this process. Now, the data that we're using to analyze crash risk is based on internal administrative records from Schneider and from the medical service provider Precision Pulmonary Diagnostics. So we have human resource data, which includes demographics, hire data, exit data. We have week-by-week operational information, so miles operated each week, the type of job being done, domicile, meaning the point where you're based, your home base is, the trips you're doing, and so on. We have crash records. We have complete crash records internal to the firm provided to us. We're going to focus on Department of Transportation reportable, preventable crashes, and I'll talk about why we pick those later on. And of course, we have the medical data, the screening, diagnosis, and treatment information, all of which our research team combined together to make a combined data set that could be analyzed. I should note that this information, the information especially from the screening and from the treatment and the diagnosis, is protected health information, and that is regulated by the HIPAA Health Information Protection and Portability and Accountability Act, I believe it is. Anyways, it's federally regulated. There are specific legal agreements required in order to use this data. Technical security conditions have to be met. We store our data, for instance, at the medical school's servers in the University of Minnesota Twin City here. And we got a certificate of confidentiality for this data from the National Institutes of Health, so that not only are we following steps to keep people from getting into it, but we also do not have to reveal in the course of any court case the individually identifiable information, which is a standard thing NIH does for sensitive medical data. And of course, what we've done is integrate together all of these pieces to enable us to do the analysis. So, what does treatment adherence mean in this context? Well, the basic standard that was used during this period of the program was 4 hours per night average use. And given the treatment compliance data we were able to get from PPD, it had some limitations in the way it was structured. We have been able to categorize 3 groups of drivers based on that data. Now, when I say it's adherence data, it's objective adherence data. It's not the driver saying, I did X. It's the CPAP machine reports what they did, and we see a digest of that record. So we can tell you that we have some people who are fully adherent, they always met the standard. Some people who are partially adherent, who met the standard sometimes but not others, and some people who never record treatment even though they've gone through a diagnosis, they've been given the machine, and they've been told as a condition of employment to do this treatment. Well, okay. How risky are truckers with untreated OSA? Now, it turns out that as in many social science settings, identifying causality is actually kind of hard here. So let me step you through. There's 3 cuts we take at this data before we get something that's useful. And here's why. Here's the first cut. What do? Well, let's explain the contrast, the gold standard that would make everything easy that we can't do here, and that's if we had a prospective randomized clinical trial. In that kind of setting, you set up the conditions, you follow the subjects from a point where the study is started until some termination point, and you take all the people who are going into the study and you randomly assign them into 2 groups. One group which is getting the treatment, the actual treatment, one group which is getting a sham treatment. So they think they're getting treated, but they're not, and if you're doing it the best possible way, it's double blind. Even the people assigning the treatments don't know who's getting what. That's to rule out placebo effects. If you have a design like this, any difference on average between the 2 groups must be caused by the treatment. Causality is identified by the design. But you can't do this for OSA. Why not? Well, first of all, because under the standards that have been in place since the horrible Tuskegee experiments of the 1930s and 40s, it is considered directly unethical to withhold a viable treatment from a subject as one arm of a study in which you are observing the outcomes of patients with the disease. You can't let people go untreated as one of your arms of your study if you have a viable treatment. And OSA has a viable treatment, APAP. So ethically, you can't do it. There's a second reason you can't do it, which is even more serious, which is we think that people with OSA are riskier driving trucks, which means they're putting other people than themselves at risk on the highway, and any firm that would sign on to a design like that would be nuts. So, not going to happen with OSA, which means that we're limited in the kind of data we can collect. So here's our first cut. We try to do a retrospective comparison. We basically identify all the drivers who were diagnosed positive, they have OSA, and before their diagnosis date, we compare their crash rate per 100,000 miles with the crash rate for all the people in the population who are unlikely to have the disease, people who are at low priority for diagnosis. That's causally clean. If there is a difference, it should be due to untreated OSA, but we have this surprising result. We did that, and we found out that the people in the diagnosed group, the people who have the disease, before they know they have it, are safer than the general driver population. Oh, we thought at first we had messed up the data. And then we figured out, no, that's not actually what's happening. Crashes affect who is diagnosed and who is not. We have something called a selection problem. Who gets into the study is affected by the dependent variable, the outcome we're interested in, whether you have a preventable crash. Here's what the hazard of exit looks like in general at Schneider during this period. Broken out, the dotted line is people who are new to the industry hires, and the solid line is people who are experienced hires, and this is weeks of tenure on the horizontal axis. And you'll observe that the instantaneous rate of exit is on 2.5% up here. That's per week, right, at the beginning. Oh, and then it drops down, and there's this second spike for inexperienced people because that's when they finish what was at the time a one-year contract, which made their training free. Why the spike right here? It's because that's the moment when, after you've been through all your training and you've been driving around in some restricted area with a training engineer, another driver helping guide you to do things, the training engineer climbs out of the truck and walks around and taps the door and says, "Okay, bud, you're good to go." And some fraction of people say, "What am I doing here?" Now, of course, most still go on, but that's a very high exit rate. And if you look at what it means for the population, here is the survival curve for the population, all drivers during this period. Down here it's not 0, it's 20%, but you see that in the first 52 weeks, we lose about half the population. And that's including people who are experienced and inexperienced all mixed in together. It's a high turnover setting. Now, it turns out that this part of the trucking industry has high turnover endemically. It's a stable situation, which has been going on since 1985. But it complicates our study problem. Here's what it looks like with the hazard of a preventable crash by experience level at higher. And you'll see that it follows a similar pattern. Inexperienced people have a very high instantaneous hazard rate of a crash at the beginning. More experienced people have a higher one, but you see that it declines steadily with experience. So what's happening here is that skill and selection of who survives by not having a crash, two things are happening at once. People who stay there are getting better at the job, and the people who couldn't do it are getting washed out, getting filtered out. Most exits in this context are quits, about 75%, but about 25% are discharges. A driver with an unacceptable preventable crash record is going to be fired. In fact, we ran a statistical test of this question, and we discovered in a standard multivariate survival model, time to event model, that having a DOT reportable preventable crash increases the risk of discharge in a given week by about 30-fold. So, what that means is that the study firm, as I said, has somewhat lower than industry average turnover, but it's still significant. Long tenure drivers with high priority were the high proportion of those diagnosed with the program exception, so those are already people who are sort of safe. New drivers generally wait for insurance to become effective, and the punchline of all this is that because of the waiting time before we get to observe them, there's a selection process going on, and a lot of the people who get a PSG have tenure that's higher at every point in the distribution than at the overall driver population because riskier people got washed out. Here's what the actual statistics look like. This is the distribution of tenure in the two populations. This is the reference population, all drivers except those that had an OSA diagnosis. People who are diagnosed, and you see at the 10th percentile mark of the population, it's 9.7, about 10 weeks of tenure. It's almost 19 among the diagnosed drivers, and if you look at the mean, it's about 16 weeks higher. That's when we know that the process that's causing that change is connected to the dependent variable we're studying, that's a big difference. Okay, well, so the drivers who got fired because they were unsafe, they never get diagnosed. They aren't in our study. So we're going to be studying people who are, on average, already somewhat safer. And doing the simple look backwards to compare the population to the diagnosed group isn't going to tell us anything. So here's the second cut. We're going to create an artificial cohort study. We're going to match cases to controls, and each diagnosed driver is going to be matched with a control who has the same amount of tenure and has the same experience at hire, so that both members of the pair have experienced the same amount of safety selection and skill acquisition, as the case may be. And we're going to select our controls from the people who are unlikely to have OSA. So now we have a second cut. We're going to compare the study subgroups, and first we're going to do it before, because that's, again, still causally clean. The people who are diagnosed don't know they have the disease. There's no issue about who's getting treatment. They're just driving. But we find out after that they have the disease. And we compare them, the control group, same amount of exposure to selection, and the test group, people who got diagnosed and have the disease, and we don't see still any statistical difference in DOT reportable crashes. We see a small difference in minor crashes, which don't automatically cause you to get fired, right? Okay, well, that leaves us with our third cut. We look after the diagnosis date, and we compare the relative crash rates across the study subgroups. And now we get something that makes sense. Drivers that are non-adherent to APAP treatment have significantly higher risk of a DOT preventable crash. No other subgroups are statistically different from the controls. Now, there's still a potential problem we'll talk about in a minute, but let's see what the numbers look like. Oh, first of all, here's the raw information about the comparison. So we have 2,016 control drivers, and we have 2,016 diagnosed drivers, and you see them broken up into negatives, full adherence, partial adherence, no adherence. And you see the average miles per week. You see the average weeks we observe the drivers, and you'll see they all are lasting for like a year or more, except the no adherence guys. We're seeing them for about something like 5 months on average. And average miles per week is similar, well, except the no adherence guys are a little lower. And here are the DOT reportable preventable crashes. Now, when we put that into a comparison of crash rates per 100,000 miles, here's what we see. Control groups are our reference standard. Whatever crash rate they're having, that's 1. Negatives, fulls, and partials all show slight elevations in the point estimate, that is the point measurement of the rate, but it's not statistically different from controls. It's essentially noise. But that's a big one, and it's significant at the 0.001 level, about 5 times the risk. Well, okay. Now, remember that we have a couple different problems caused by the fact that we're looking at the period after diagnosis. And that means that the people who are in the group that has no adherence, who have partial adherence, who have full adherence, are not randomly assigned by us. They are selected by the people in question. So first thing is, other things that affect this crash rate might not be the same across the groups. So we're going to do a multivariate statistical analysis to account for that. We're going to run what's called an Anderson-Gill time-to-event multivariate model. It's a version of the, for those of you who do survival statistics, of the more familiar Cox proportional hazards model. And we're going to adjust for all of these other things we know about the drivers. And we find that, in fact, some of those other things are different across the subgroups. And when we do this adjustment, we find that the estimates of the hazard ratios, which is the same thing as the difference in the crash rates, but now in the multivariate model, is slightly different. Qualitatively the same. Here's controls. They're the reference group. Negatives are a little higher, fulls a little higher, partials a little higher, but not statistically different. No adherence, still at the 0.001 significance level, and now they're just under 4 times higher in risk instead of 5 times higher. So that difference, that drop, is because of things that weren't the same across the study groups. And we've accounted for that now. Now, that was our first robustness check. Oh, I'm sorry, let's see here. Yeah, that was our first robustness check. Here's the second one. A question that can arise in this context is, isn't it kind of aggressive to treat everybody who has mild OSA? There's some dispute in the sleep medicine community about what the treatment protocol ought to be for people with mild OSA. Now, not everybody has the same opinion, but there's some people have different opinions, let's put it that way. So suppose we change the threshold for diagnosis to AHI 15, moderate, plus there's always a background thing here that a clinician has also done the diagnosis, which I should say just to be clear about the actual decision process, but we care about the fact that we're going to go to AHI 15. And so what we're going to do is we're going to basically restructure our data so that we now have anybody who is under 15 is a negative, right? Even though some of them are getting treatment. And we're going to run the same model. And what we find is that the same pattern is qualitatively observed. Nobody else is different except the no adherence group. And their point estimate of hazard ratio went back up to almost, it's 4.5 again now. Higher, back up close to 5 again, right? And interestingly enough, the partially adherent drivers who are not getting the full kind of treatment, but they're getting some, they are now almost statistically riskier. The p-value is 0.082, and the conventional standard for medical studies is 0.05, and that's dropped a lot from the earlier version. And they look like they're maybe 75 percentage points, a little bit less than twice as risky, right? And by the way, the fact that we see these two changes is consistent with the idea that at least part of what we're observing here and the difference across the study subgroups is due to the clinical effects of treatment. That's the most natural explanation of seeing this pattern of changes. Here's another robustness check. What about looking at all crashes? So I need to talk a little bit about what preventability means for crashes here. So inside trucking companies, the normal procedure when a driver is involved in a crash is to use the National Safety Council standards and the information collected by the company about the crash to decide whether the crash is preventable or not. Preventable is not the same thing as legally at fault. Although sometimes they might be related in a lawsuit, it's not the same concept. Preventable means that there was some action that could have been and should have been taken by the driver that would have avoided the crash. So it's a broader standard. Now, trucking companies, since they use this preventability standard to run their own internal safety systems, decide who gets penalized for crashes and who does not, and they use that information to defend themselves in lawsuits when people who are injured in crashes sue them for wrongful injury or wrongful death, they have every economic incentive to get that categorization right. So it's a pretty useful categorization. And I'll note parenthetically that there's been some talk of trying to let the trucking companies tell the FMCSA when their crashes are preventable or not. And if you just let trucking companies do that, unfortunately it would change the economic incentives, because then the incentive would be to make it public that you didn't have preventable crashes. So I think that's a bad idea. That if preventability is going to be used, it should be used in a situation like this, or it should be used in a situation where there is some formal process for vetting the evaluation of what's preventable and what's not. Anyways, it's a very nice way of focusing in on the crashes which have a driver behavior component. And what we see when we bring in all crashes is, again, the same qualitative pattern of results. Nobody else is different but the no adherence drivers. They are statistically more risky. But now, this is in with the AHI 5 or greater, right? So now we bump from 3.79 down to 2.21. We drop a lot in the estimate of the increase in crash risk from having untreated OSA, well, being in the no adherence group. And it's interesting that that happens because the crash count of non-preventable crashes for controls jumps up a lot compared to the no adherence drivers. And if that pattern is actually similar to the pattern in government data, which does not have preventability, so you just have to use all crashes, right? That suggests that maybe government studies might be generally underestimating crash risk in this kind of a context. In any case, for our point, our punchline is it's not preventability that's driving the qualitative pattern. No, that's in the data, and it's connected with who is non-adherent. This is a graph that shows the cumulative risk of a crash over time predicted from our model. When somebody gets their diagnosis at, I think it's 30 weeks of tenure, something like that, and observing their time path after that. And you see here, the controls are blue, the green are the people who are fully adherent, slightly elevated in the prediction of the model, but not statistically different, partial adherence and negatives. And up here are the no adherents, climbing to the roof. Well, let's put that in managerial terms. What does it mean for a trucking company? What does it mean for Schneider when they have this program in place? So a driver typically works over the road, rule of thumb guideline, about 100,000 miles a year. If you had 1,000 drivers driving 100,000 miles a year, the controls would have 14 preventable DOT reportable crashes. Adherent drivers, same, 14. Non-adherent drivers, 70. That's preventable crash. Driver behavior was involved. DOT reportable now, let me explain to you. That means one of three things. There was a fatality. One of the vehicles involved had to be towed from the scene, so significant property damage. Or someone involved had to be treated medically away from the scene. That's a DOT reportable crash. So these are crashes we all care about. So let me come to some conclusions here. Now, there is a limitation because of this self-selection into who is adherent and who is non-adherent, right? As I pointed out, it's illegal and unethical to assign people arbitrarily, randomly to being treated or not. We can't do that, which means that people who are the non-adherence types may well be different from the people who are adherence types. Because if you go through this process and you get the diagnosis and it's designed and it's explained to you what the issue is, and then you're told, you need to wear this machine every night to keep your job, and you say, sure thing, boss, and then you walk out the door and you never do it, that probably means that you are somebody who might think not so highly of following other rules that might matter for safety. And so in this context, we do not have any specific way of parsing out how much is that bad behaviors and how much is untreated sleep apnea. Now, we know at least some of it has to be untreated sleep apnea because of the effects we get with AHI 15. But what's the breakout? There is no way from these data to definitively say. What are the implications for employers? Well, an employer-mandated program that includes required treatment adherence is going to sort the workforce. It's going to retain those who are adherent. It's going to filter out those who are non-adherent, and therefore much riskier. So it's going to improve the safety record of the fleet that's running the program. How big is that filtering effect? Well, here's what it looks like during the study. You can see that the dark blue is discharge, so it's 5% among controls. It's maybe 11% among the negatives. It's maybe 5 or 6% among the fully adherent, 10% of partially adherent, 25% among the no adherents. Some of them got fired for not being adherent. But look at the quit. That's the middle level, right? The quits are 60%. Because what happens is they know they're going to lose their job. They don't want to get discharged, so they quit. So what that means is that Schneider ends up with a company full of all of these people and not very many of those people. And that improves their safety record. What about public policy? Well, under the current screening regulations, so I should say, every commercial driver has to go through a medical exam to determine their medical fitness to drive. And at least every 2 years, sometimes more frequently if they have a medical condition that might be related to safety. But there is no test that can be given during such an examination for whether you have sleep apnea. That requires some measurement over time, a PSG, or there are some other things now which might do it without having a full PSG with things like Fitbit and so on, but you can't do it on the spot in a 45-minute exam. So the question is, should the FMCSA have standards by which medical examiners observe drivers coming into the medical exam and say, under these standards, you have to go get that extra information collected. You have to be diagnosed to see if you have the disease. Right now, there is no such standard. Medical examiners can choose to do that following their best clinical judgment, but there's no required standard. And of course, it's well established in the truck driver population that if you have a medical condition that doesn't bother you, but if you reveal it, you're not going to be able to drive, they won't give you a medical certificate, you aren't going to say anything about it. So what it means is people, for instance, people who quit from Schneider in this time period of the program who have been diagnosed positively with OSA can choose to go to some other company that doesn't have such a program, which almost no others. There's a few that have a voluntary one. Nobody else has a mandatory one as far as I know. And they can be back on the road and driving out on the highway with you. So that suggests that there ought to be consideration of a screening standard, and there was one started, but the recent change in administration led to the DOT removing the preliminary rulemaking they established on this topic. And I think our study suggests that that might be something they should revisit. We're also analyzing, I should say, savings to the study firm associated with the OSA program due to lower costs for non-OSA medical insurance claims, and that looks like it's going to be a big bang, and lower costs due to preventable crashes. The initial results show some significant savings. So those things, as we send them out, we hope will help reduce resistance among firms to the idea that there should be such a program or screening, that OSA should be taken more seriously, basically, because it will shows that the cost of a program like this is at least significantly offset, if not fully offset, by some of the other things you save. And that is my presentation. So I think we're ready for questions.
Right. Any questions from anyone here in the room?
Did the company try any alternative treatment methods, like trying to get people to lose weight or anything else? If people were failing to adhere to the CPAP machines, did they explore alternative forms of treatment to see if that would motivate people?
Well, so there's two things to say there. One is there's been some very nice randomized clinical control trials of weight loss treatment programs in truck drivers done by Oregon Health Sciences University. And what they find is that the best intervention they can come up with in this kind of truckload environment produces about half the gain that you get in office workers, that is half the decrease in weight, which is, I'm going to say approximately, I'm sort of making up the exact numbers, but it's this order of magnitude. In office workers, you can get 12 pounds. In truckers, you can get 6. I mean, that's probably not the exact right numbers, but it's that order of magnitude, right? So is there a way to, if your sleep apnea is due to the extra material in your neck because of high BMI, losing weight is an effective treatment. It's very, very hard to implement. That's just one factual point. Second point is, from the standpoint of the trucking company, once they put a program in place like this, they can expect that it will be addressed every time they are sued for a wrongful injury or wrongful death. Or as the guy who was the senior vice president of safety at the time told me, yep, no good deed goes unpunished. Which means that they have to be able to defend how they do the program legally if they're going to use one. That's, I think, another thing that keeps some other companies from doing a mandated one, right? And so the key thing about CPAP is you can measure whether people are adhering. And you can take action if they aren't. And so far as I know, there is at present no other treatment for this disease of which that is true. So, I don't know, does that help? Does that give enough to answer your question? Yeah. Another question?
What about the carrot?
Well, that is incentivizing drivers in a positive way to use CPAP. So I don't know whether that's been experimented with. Remember, this data is from 2005 to 2009, so the program has gone through several development phases since then. It now has a somewhat different character. I will say that one of the main issues in internet conversation and social media conversation by truck drivers when the subject of sleep apnea comes up is, oh, now you're going to make me go do this and I'm going to have to pay for it. Because in the context of small trucking companies, that often might be what would happen. Now, Schneider has the advantage that if you're in their employee insurance program, they treat it as preventive medicine and there's no out-of-pocket expense to you. So if you're in that program, that's good for you. I believe that what this study shows is that we should be taking seriously the idea of such programs. The study that we're working on about the changes in the savings in medical costs suggest to me that insurance companies ought to be more forthcoming about doing the same kind of thing with small trucker clients that Schneider did with their insurance program with their drivers. But we have to get that evidence out in front of a referee journal set of journal referees and get it out to the public in a published form before I can sort of make big claims about that.
Yes. So what convinced Schneider to start this program when no other trucking company was doing this? And since they've been doing it, it's been showing successful, why do you think that other trucking companies are reluctant to adhere to this?
Pardon me. Well, so Schneider has established, especially during the period that we're talking about here, a well-earned reputation for being a safety leader among firms in this part of the industry. So I'm not in a position to sort of talk about all kinds of other things that are their internal policies, but I can tell you that this, in my view, was emblematic of the kind of approach they were taking. They believed that this was a way to improve safety in their workforce, and they wanted to convince other carriers to do the same thing. Why are other carriers not doing it? Well, there's a huge amount of inertia here, right? Historical way of doing things. This is a part of the industry in which, as I said at the beginning, there's high turnover of drivers. Companies, especially today with the economy booming, companies in the truckload part of the trucking business are scrambling to acquire and retain drivers, and the annualized turnover rates in this part of the industry as a whole are now up around 100% a year. Now, that has some economic reasons, which are not the subject of this talk, which offline I'll be happy to talk to you about, because I think it's not an accident, that's how it works. That's a result of the kind of competition in the product market for truckload services that we get, and its knock-on effects in how firms have to behave in order to compete. But in that context, would you want to be the person who steps out and says, okay, we have another hurdle our drivers have to get through? It's hard to sell that inside a firm. And that's why the way that the industry potentially can move forward here is if there's a regulation so that everybody's in the same boat, and then nobody can say, oh, you don't have to do that, come to my company, and poach drivers from someone else, right? And Schneider has held on to this because they've been convinced by their internal data and some of our results that it's paying off for them, but getting anybody else to move is real hard. Yes?
Where does UPS and FedEx sit on this?
I don't actually know their exact policies. As far as I know, Schneider is the only company that has a mandatory sleep apnea screening program. Now, it could be that I'm insufficiently informed. Certainly they are the kind of firms with a large scale and the economic position that would enable them to experiment and invest in this kind of thing if they thought it was worthwhile. So I don't want to say they're not doing anything. I'll say I don't know of anything they're doing. Yeah, hey, you're asking good questions.
I'm just curious. So have you guys studied like the cost of to Schneider, like their extra cost and burden in insurance compared to other driving companies, and maybe analyzed if that is offset by the like reduction in crashes?
Well, so as I say, we are working on a paper using the same data I described here, but adding in information from Schneider's medical insurance program in the period 05 through 09 to analyze what the differences in non-sleep apnea medical insurance costs are for Schneider across these study subgroups. And they are a big enough firm that they are self-insured for their medical insurance program. So whatever they save goes to their bottom line. And I will say, without giving specifics, because we haven't got it through the refereeing process, it looks like some pretty good numbers. Now, comparing them to other firms, no. That's proprietary data within each other firm. I would have to have 2 or 3 other firms that would agree to pool their data and let us talk about the aggregate results and so on. And so far, that's not something we have been able to do.
But is Schneider willing to share their information to say, hey, look at how much we pay for insurance and look at how much we've saved on crashes if it does come up?
I doubt they would do that, but they're happy to have us publish the results when we have them finalized about the savings across the different subgroups. Now, you can ask them directly what they think they might be willing to share, but it is a publicly traded firm now as of about a year and a half ago. So they make public lots of things related to their business operations, but I don't believe that's one of them.
What about the general population in obstructive sleep apnea? I am assuming we have this problem across the whole population. Are there educational programs out there that make people decide or help people decide, I need to do the APAP?
So not something I've directly studied, but I can give you some kind of background information I picked up in doing this work. It is well established statistically that untreated sleep apnea is associated with higher crash risk in the general driving population. And in the general driving population, and if I remember right, I think there's a meta-study, and I think the estimated increase in crash risk is on the order of double for untreated sleep apnea compared to people who are healthy. But I'll say that that's an impressionistic recounting of stuff that I haven't directly studied. It's significant. That much I can say. Now, two things to say. Of course, in the general public, because typically that's using government data, maybe there's a study done by an insurance company where they have an internal analysis of crashes, which I'm not aware of. But with government data, you can't identify which are at fault and which are not, which are preventable and which are not. So whatever the number is, it's probably a little worse than that. Whatever the number that's been estimated is probably actually a little worse than that. And the second thing to say is that about studying that problem is there's less safety selection in the general driver population, because if you have a crash, but you need to drive to go to work, in most states you can get into an assigned risk pool, you can keep on driving. And as far as I know, there aren't any states that have a medical qualification for your personal car driver's license, right? So now, something else to say is that sleep medicine has been progressing a lot in the last 25 years, and I am not a sleep medicine professional. I'm an economist, a behavioral economist. But I know that, at least historically, it's been difficult in many parts of the general population to get people to adhere to CPAP, because adapting to it is actually fairly complicated for most people and might take a couple of different visits. And at least historically, if you're in the Medicare system, the system pays for the machine but not for the follow-up adaptation process, or at least it hasn't historically. That might have changed now. But I know I've heard my sleep medicine co-authors decry that problem in the past. So, if you have sleep apnea, should you be driving without undergoing CPAP treatment on a regular basis? No, you should not, for your safety and for ours. But that's an opinion from, a behavioral economic researcher. Can I get people to change their behavior? Yeah, well, what are the incentives?
But it is an issue for everyone, even if you're not driving.
Yeah.
Falling asleep while you're working
Yes.
is not exactly a good thing.
And something else is that we know now that there are so many functions of sleep that are essential for health. There's a book that I have been reading, which the author was interviewed on NPR recently. It's called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, who is the head of the Experimental Sleep Research Lab and Neuroimaging Unit at the University of California, Berkeley. And it's for the intelligent layman, and it basically it lists all the different things that sleep does for us. And it's not an accident that we sleep. We sleep because it makes us healthy, and it makes us intelligent, and it makes us attractive, and it makes us, here's one little takeaway. This is from his interview the other day on NPR. A certain very modest amount of sleep deprivation, I want to say it's on the order of an hour a night for 7 nights, but I don't remember the exact number, but it's not a lot compared to what many of us get, will drop the number of the immune system cells in your body that fight cancer, that basically take the aberrant cells that could become cancer and kill them, by over half. So, don't want to get cancer? Sleep regularly. So, is it a problem if you have sleep apnea and aren't getting treated? Yes, it is, for you and for the rest of us too.
Nobody out there?
No.
Well, let me say in sort of wrapping up that I want to be clear that I've got some careful evidence about the connection between crash risk, preventable crash risk, and untreated sleep apnea in truck drivers, which I have delivered for you. When I talk about sleep problems more generally, I'm offering some personal opinions because I'm not a medical practitioner. I want to be clear that's the case. But those are personal opinions based upon reading the literature. So.
Certainly, sleep has been in the news besides that author who, what was the name of the book?
Why We Sleep.
Why We Sleep. Okay.
That was a good interview.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Really good interview.
Someone can get a podcast of the interview.
Yes, and the book's on Amazon and
Okay.
on your Kindle or hardback or paperback, whatever.
Sounds good. Why don't you join me in thanking Professor Brooks for his talk? Very interesting. I'd just like you all to remember that next week, same time, same place, we will have a very interesting talk by Greg Lindsay from the Humphrey School. And he will be talking about exposure to risk, the built environment, and bicycle crashes in Minneapolis. And he's been studying this problem for quite some time and should be very interesting. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're off the web?
Yep.
All right. Sarah?
Yes.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
You too.
So we should sit down just a minute, don't we?
Yeah,
Make sure we're
yeah.
wrapping up things here. Let's see here.
I'm Eric. I'm studying to be a planner in the Humphrey School. Eric, what's your last name? Thompson.
I would ask questions, but I didn't know enough to ask him.
Oh, come on. I'm sure you do know plenty. Hit him up on automated trucks or something.
Well, I did have some thought for the one for you. Would you be able to notice this from a sound signature truck?
Say that again.
That if someone had sleep apnea, sleep in the truck, I don't know.
You're more likely to sense it by the motion of the vehicle.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were sleeping, if you could hear that. Please not.
I don't know, to be honest with you, but to instrument vehicles to do that.
Have you checked in on the graduate yet?
Yes, I did. I haven't been in my room yet, but I
Okay.
did check in and put the hang tag on my car.
Gotcha. Okay.
I didn't want to get so